The not deer are an internet creation, they said. Born on Reddit around 2019, they said. Words of keyboard skeptics everywhere. And honestly, I was right there with them on this one. Until I found a farm report from Calumet, Oklahoma, 1951, long before Reddit existed. I'm Carol Ann. Welcome to the In-Between. As far as the cryptid neighborhood goes, the not deer seems to be about the newest kid on the block. While the skeptics repeat until they're blue in the face,
it happens every time,
that the not deer was not a thing before 2019. And I have to agree that their history is a little thin compared to some of the big guys on the block. I am here to tell you that there may be a little more to the story than that. So I set out on a journey to discover the roots of the not deer. First place to look, Native American legends, of course. Now, while there is no entity in any legend or lore from anywhere around the world exactly matching the not deer, there certainly are a few not deer adjacent tales that are certainly worth considering. Probably the most well-known is the Deer Woman. The Sioux, Ojibwe, Cherokee, Muskogee, Choctaw, Seminole, Ponca, Omaha, Osage, Pawnee, and Iroquois, among others, all have this little lady in their legend storehouse. It is said she appears as a beautiful woman to those men who have either been unfaithful to their wives or don't treat them well. The men she approaches don't see her deer-like features, mainly her bottom half and feet, until it's too late. She lures them into the woods and either leaves them hopelessly lost or drives them insane. One encounter was documented by the late, great Linda Godfrey in her book from 2019, I Know What I Saw. This encounter comes from a gentleman named Patrick and happened about 10 years ago around the town of Hermosa in western South Dakota. Patrick and his friend are driving late one dark night on their way to Hermosa. He mentions it's a windy road and it comes close to Battle Creek. So I'm pretty sure it's this stretch of Highway 40 right here, just to show you the remoteness and spaghettiness of the road. They're about 15 miles from Hermosa, and Patrick is asleep in the passenger seat when his buddy wakes him up and says, "Hey, dude, I just passed some woman standing in the tall grass on the side of the road. Should we pick her up?" Patrick, a member of the Oglala Sioux tribe, whose mother has told him all kinds of stories of not only the dangers of hitchhikers, but also of shapeshifters, goatmen, dogmen, and even deer people, tells his buddy, no way. If there's a woman out there at 2 a.m., she can figure out her own way to get home. Just a few minutes later, his friend excitedly points out the window to the side of the road. There she is. Patrick looks, and sure enough, there's a woman there standing in the tall grass. Patrick tells his friend, go faster, and they keep driving. As they're nearing Battle Creek, they see her again, but this time she's actually standing on the edge of the road and not back in the tall grass. She's very attractive, tall and slender with long black hair. She's wearing some kind of dress, so Patrick, being well versed in the legends, immediately looks at her feet. And sure enough, he sees hooves. And she has a tail like a mule deer. Her eyes shine white in the headlights, just like a deer. The driver freaks out and hits the gas, and they speed up as fast as the curvy road will allow. Patrick looks back and sees several deer-like shapes running behind their truck, which is traveling at upwards of 80 miles an hour. By the time they make it to Hermosa, the figures behind them have faded into the night, and the two find a truck stop where they can hole up under the bright lights for a couple of hours until they are convinced the deer woman has given up her quest. Now, obviously, the deer woman is not the same thing as the not deer, but at least we know there is a solid link in Native American legend to the deer as a mystical being. So, let's take one step closer. The Choctaw tell stories of an interesting little creature called the Cachahotapalo. that is a deer-man hybrid with the upper body of a man and the lower half of a deer and a small, shriveled head and face, sometimes with and sometimes without antlers. The Cachihotapalo is not so much malicious as it is mischievous. It hangs out in swampy areas and woodlands of the traditional Choctaw territory, which puts it in the swamps and marshlands of Mississippi and Louisiana. And its favorite pastime is to freak out hunters. It sneaks up behind them and screams like a woman at the top of its lungs, and then runs away at incredible speed into the forest, giddy at the chaos it's created. In fact, Cachihotapalo actually translates to something like, "he who calls like a woman." However, beware if you are a disrespectful hunter, because if that's the case, the Cachihotapalo will run ahead of the hunter and scare away any game animals, disrupting the hunt and ensuring that disrespectful hunter does not succeed in his hunting quest. And while it is said that the Cachihotapalo does not directly harm people, looking directly at its face is said to bring bad luck or evil. One case in point is an encounter story from a Redditor named Only Helicopter. Let's just call him Oscar. It's July of 2006, and Oscar is working at a Boy Scout camp near Northwoods, New Hampshire. It's Wednesday night, and some of the staff had the night off and have gone to nearby Concord for some fun. On their way back to camp around midnight, Oscar is driving with 3 other staff members in the car. He makes a right onto Blake Hill Road, a heavily wooded, paved, but pretty windy road that leads to the camp, and probably steps on the gas a little too heavy, especially considering the patchy fog that was hanging low to the ground that night. As he rounds one of these windy corners, a deer shoots out in front of his car. Not a huge surprise for this area of the country, but this deer is a huge surprise. It's running across the road on these 4 wonky legs that look like they have extra joints. It has a wide alligator-shaped mouth and huge, deep black eyes. Panic overwhelms Oscar as he plows through this thing. And let me be clear, everybody has a sense of panic when something jumps out in front of their car, but this level of terror goes beyond the norm. He swears he had to have hit it, but the only noise they hear is the car skidding on the pavement as Oscar slams on the brakes and slides to a stop. Oscar asks the other people in the car, "Did you see that?" 2 said yes, and the third guy was sleeping, so no. As the overwhelming fear starts to subside, Oscar gets out of the car, expecting to see the remnants of a deer under the car, but nothing is there, like it was a ghost or something. So Oscar gets back in the car and leaves. Fast forward 2 weeks. It's a hot, humid day in early August that spawns a supercell thunderstorm heading right for the camp. The same 4 guys head to the edge of the lake to watch the storm come in over the lake. As the storm pushes to their side of Northwood Lake, a wall of wind slams into the camp, strong enough to break off treetops. The 4 boys start running for shelter as they're pelted with rain and hail. Falling trees are smashing cars and cabins around them when blackness. When Oscar wakes up, his back and his head are screaming in pain. He was hit by one of the falling trees. The camp staff carries him half a mile to get him help, and in the end, Oscar has an L3 vertebra fracture and 10 stitches in his head. Meteorologists say it was a microburst that hit the camp, and Oscar was the only one to get hurt. Yup, could be just a very unfortunate accident. Or maybe a good life lesson to not stand outside in front of a raging supercell. Either way, kind of makes you wonder if the deer creature Oscar saw was maybe there as a warning. Or was the unfortunate tree accident payback for the unfortunate car accident? But that's not the end of the ties that the not deer have with stories of old. And this one is going to blow your mind. Prepare for a tangent rabbit hole. According to Canadian ethnologist and linguist Basil Johnston, there's a legend passed down by the Ojibwe up here in my northern neck of the woods and southern Canada about a spirit who can appear as either a man or a deer. The actual story is about an Ojibwe man named Eshkekbug. Eshkekbug is hanging out one day when he looks up to see something in the sky. A clamshell-shaped skycraft that's slightly glowing and made of rainbow metal, which, as an aside, leaves a circular ring in the grass when it leaves. The skycraft hovers its way down to a landing, and 10 beautiful women, or sky people, come out of the craft and proceed to play and dance. Eshkekbug is more than a little bewitched by the beautiful dancing sky people, but is even more stunned when a deer man spirit, which remember can either be man or deer, also appears. The deer man helps Eshkekbug win the heart of one of the sky women whom he marries. Showing his gratitude to Eshkekbug, the deer man grants him the ability to shapeshift. Now, this part I don't understand, since I would think it would be Eshkekbug who would want to show his gratitude to the deer man, but whatever, I'm just the messenger. The sky people experience time different than we earth people, and in essence, they don't age. As Basil Johnston puts it in his book, Ojibwe Heritage, alas, time for the sky people has little force and meaning. So while Eshkekbug ages like a normal human, his wife does not. Extrapolate that out, and we're now talking about time distortion, which can give way to discussions of both missing time and time slips. Missing time, of course, being a common experience among UFO experiencers. They have a son named Joanno Giesig, whose only description is that he's tall. Well, that must have been an important detail. And if you think about it, it's the mirror version of the Genesis story that describes sons of God descending to earth to mate with the daughters of men, with resulting children described as giants. If you want a deeper dive into the topic of giants, where we talk about the Genesis version, I will have a link in the description for that episode. Anyway, Joanno Giesig eventually gets to take a trip in the skycraft, which incidentally is powered by a specific song that only works when sung by women, to the moon to meet his sky people grandparents. Now, the song thing might sound kind of funny until you hear that in 2011, the Ohio Aerospace Institute came out and said it could be possible to power a spacecraft with light or sound waves. These waves are propagated in magnetic fields of plasma that are supplied by the sun. So, unlimited energy. Eshkekbug's wife talks about feeling like there is something about the skycraft that she should know but can't remember, which is yet another common occurrence among UFO witnesses, having memories blocked. But eventually, she remembers the special song entrusted in her and all women to fly the skycraft. Anyway, Joanno Giesig must have had a pretty good visit, because his grandparents send him back to Earth to get his dad. What about his mom? Their daughter? And tell Eshkekbug to bring back to the moon one of every bird species on Earth. What does that remind you of? Man, the more I learn about all of these different histories of different events and legends and stories, the more my mind is blown by how there are so many overlaps and similarities and tie-ins between what should be disparate histories. It's crazy. Anyway, so all in all, Deer Man is pretty much a positive figure in Ojibwe lore. But we have to balance that with the trickster Kashihotapalo and the slightly more ominous Deer Woman. And as we know from the legend of the Skinwalker, that things that start out being either good or at worst neutral can devolve into truly bad things. So with that dichotomy in mind, makes you wonder on what side of the fence are the not deer. Because I, for one, have no idea. They usually come with that overwhelming sense of dread, but as far as I know, they've never hurt anyone. These next two stories are perfect cases in point. The first one comes from Redditor NoPlan9840, who posted about her encounter in Lynn, Massachusetts from about 12 years ago. For the sake of the story, let's just call her Penny. At the time of her encounter, she's 16 years old with, surprise, surprise, a bit of a rebellious streak. Who saw that one coming? On this particular night, she decides to sneak out of the house around 3 a.m. and go to the Lynn Reservation, which is not real far since the reservation is pretty much right smack in the middle of the Boston burbs. She's going there because the camping area is the spot of choice for kids to go smoke weed. What? Kids smoke weed?
Surely.
Penny parks her car in the lot and walks the 5-minute, heavily wooded trail that leads to the super secret smoking lounge. She makes a small fire and rolls a joint. As she's rolling, she hears something on 4 legs in the woods behind her. She really didn't think anything of it because Lynn, Massachusetts doesn't have a whole lot of predators. But then she hears its gait change from 4 legs to 2. Penny's trying to process her confusion at what could be going on behind her when every night critter in hearing distance goes quiet. The only noise she hears is the popping fire and the air in and out of her chest. That's when the first pangs of fear hit her. She yells out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Since they are essentially inside of the city, she's hoping it's some random homeless dude trying to work up the courage to ask her for some food or money. No response. Everything is quiet. Penny's gut is telling her flight is the appropriate option here, but she doesn't move. If it's not a person, then it must be an animal, and she didn't want to give the animal something to hunt by running away. But then it speaks.
Can I bum a light?
But it didn't sound like any human she'd heard before. It almost sounded more like a parrot just copying whatever its owner taught it. But it doesn't sound like a parrot either, so it has to be a human. And she relaxes a little knowing it's not an animal stalking her. Penny answers, "Sure, but please come out into the light so I can see you. You're giving me the creeps."
Can I bum a light?
Okay, creepiness factor upgrade is successful. The pangs of fear come rushing back. She doesn't say anything this time. If this guy thinks she's going to get up and go to him, he'd better think again.
Can I bum a light?
Okay, that's enough. Penny yells a more colorful version of "screw you" and tells him to find a light somewhere else. Then she hears it run away on 4 legs. She could hear each of the 4 feet hit the ground. The night noises come back, and she even feels the temperature go up a couple of degrees. However, those pangs of fear, that feeling of dread just keeps building, and she knows it's time to vacate the area. She takes a deep breath, packs up her stuff, puts out the fire, and heads back the way she came toward the parking lot. She's staying as calm as she can, trying her best not to show any fear. Thanks to what her mom taught her in her Creeps 101 class, Penny's ready to bust out loud and proud if this creep gets too close. She is still hoping this is an animal and not a creep, but she has a knife ready anyway in case things go really south. But every hair on the back of her neck is standing, and she can feel that man or animal is still watching her. She just keeps walking calmly and finally sees her car about 200 feet in front of her. She's still on high alert, but just seeing the car waiting for her floods her with relief. Her optimism that this little encounter is almost over gives her the courage to look behind her to see if anything's there. She turns her head to the path behind her, and about 40 feet behind her is a male deer standing on its hind legs. Penny freaks. She has no idea what a notdeer or a skinwalker or anything else like that even is. Literally zero awareness of the concept of these things. But what she sees in front of her hits her at an instinctual level as something seriously bad. She turns on a dime and books it to her car. She gets in, starts it up, and drives away before even taking the time to turn on the headlights. Penny's never gone back to those woods and has no plans to go into any woods ever in the future. And she didn't accidentally stumble head first into this paranormal rabbit hole until years later. But at least now she has some idea of what she ran into that night. Too bad knowing doesn't remove the feeling of a boulder in her stomach every time she thinks about it to this day. The next story comes from a Redditor named Parallax. Let's just call him Paul. Paul posted in 2021 about something pretty freaky that happened to him. Paul lives in Pennsylvania, but this encounter takes place at his aunt's house. However, I think just based on the text of the post that it happened somewhere in that greater vicinity. His aunt and uncle have 3 kids and live a couple of miles down a remote dirt road in a pretty rural area, like 25 minutes to the nearest store and 35 minutes away from any police, kind of remote. Paul's visiting for a birthday party. But when it comes time to leave, his 3 cousins all rallied together to get him to stay overnight so they could spend some extra time with him. Paul says, okay. Kind of hard to say no to that. His aunt and uncle go to bed about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and Paul stays up with the smallest cousin watching Criminal Minds. At 11 p.m., that one gives up and heads to bed. But Paul decides to stay up just a little longer. The couch he's sitting on is against the living room window opposite the TV. And as he's sitting there, he sees the walls in front of him light up from the motion detector light outside going off and coming through the window behind him. His heart starts beating a little faster. He doesn't live out in the middle of nowhere, so to him, the light going on has to mean that someone is prowling around outside. He cautiously looks out the window to discover it's just a deer standing about 20-30 feet away from the house by the tree line. He breathes a sigh of relief. Just a deer, nothing to see here. And he goes back to watching TV. 5 minutes later, the light shuts off. By 11:30, even Paul is yawning. So while he's still watching Criminal Minds, he starts laying out blankets and pillows on the couch because that's his bed for the night. As he's making his bed, he's startled by the room flooding with light through the front window again. He thinks, it's gotta be that deer again, and looks out the window, but nothing's there. Okay, whatever. It's 11:45 and he's tired, so he just keeps making his bed. Not 30 seconds later, something taps at the front window. Paul turns around, expecting to see Bambi looking at him, but what he sees is not Bambi. There is a deer out there. It's off to the side of the yard, but it's not the same deer he saw the first time. This deer looks deformed and skinny, with like 0 body fat, all skin and bones. And it's just standing there, looking straight at Paul with a stare that, in his words, is staring into his soul. As if this weird caricature of a deer staring at him and the sense of dread he feels isn't unsettling enough, the next move sends Paul's stomach into his toes. The deer starts contorting itself around, moving in ways no natural animal does until it is standing on its 2 back legs. Then it takes off on 2 legs into the woods. Freaking out, Paul immediately closes the curtains, makes sure all the doors are locked, and sits down as far away from the window as he can get. He doesn't sleep at all. His brain is way too busy trying to rationalize what he just witnessed. But he can't. Paul doesn't stay overnight at that house anymore and always makes sure he says goodbye and is out of Dodge before it gets dark. Now here is the twist to this whole deep dive that I never expected to find. A trail of transformation stories between deer and wolves. Jerome Clark, no stranger to strange things with his work in ufology and strange events in general, detailed 2 interesting deer encounters while he was a contributor to Fate magazine. One occurred in 1971 when his own dad told him about a weird animal he had encountered along a road in Canby, Minnesota, which, if you watch this channel, might sound familiar. Canby, Minnesota plays a part in a super strange disappearance we covered a few weeks ago in the Weird Minnesota episode. Link in the description if you want to go check that one out. Anyway, Jerome's dad told him that he saw what looked like a small deer, but with a horse-like tail standing on the side of the road. He shot at it just to scare it, but amazingly, the deer didn't react. Interesting. But the one I want to focus on is the second account. This one's from 1951, so well before the current not deer explosion. It's an account from one Mrs. Lawrence Lobb of Calumet, Oklahoma. Mrs. Lobb lives on a farm and gets up in the morning to head out to the fields for chores like she does every morning. But this particular morning, standing in the field is what she describes as something that, at first glance, looks like a deer, but at the ends of its 4 skinny deer legs are 4 feet with pads, so like canine feet. She says it has long hair. Now, I don't know if that means long hair compared to regular deer fur or, hair long enough to braid at a slumber party. I have no idea, but it also has pointed ears and a bushy tail. She says to her, it looks like a cross between a wolf and a deer. And while this may be the first recorded connection I can find between deer and wolves, certainly not the only one. Another encounter documented by Linda Godfrey is from a man she calls Dale, who wrote her after hearing her on Coast to Coast talking about Dogman. He says in 1998, he's living in Liverpool, Ohio, at the top of Calcutta Smith Ferry Hill, which in the winter can be a pretty wicked road to navigate. Driving up is bad, but driving back down on the other side can be worse. Dale usually works the night shift, but this particular night kind of feels like garbage, so leaves work around 1:30 a.m. This particular night is sometime around late November or early December, so of course, on a night when Dale just wants to get home and go to bed, it had snowed earlier in the day, so the roads are totally icy. So he slowly and carefully makes his way up the side of the hill. The moon is out and reflecting on all the new snow and ice, making it nice and easy to see everything around him. As he crests the hill and starts down the other side, as careful as he was being, he still starts to slide. His back end starts going left, turning the front end of the car right, where Dale finds himself looking into a farmer's field. Isn't it interesting, the things you notice when you're stressing out? As Dale finds himself facing the farmer's field that he should not be facing, he notices a family of 4 deer step out of the wood line surrounding Beaver Creek and start running toward his car. He manages to get the car back under control and straightened out, but then starts sliding again, this time successfully completing a full 360-degree spin and then some, leaving him stopped facing the farmer's field again. Just as he's about to try to back up to straighten back out onto the road, he sees the 4 deer about 300 feet in front of him. Up until this point, Dale thought they were just normal deer. Until now, when 2 of them stand up on their back legs. What he thought were just deer now look like wolves. They're standing about 6 feet high, and their eyes are a weird green color. Not the color deer eyes usually shine. They usually shine white. Just so you know, canines are the ones with green eyeshine. He can see they're all different sizes. The 2 biggest ones are the ones that are standing, and their hands are not so much human as they were lengthened canine paws. Freaking out, Dale frantically gets his car back on the road and starts taking off as fast as the icy roads will let him. And the deer, or wolves, drop back down onto all 4s and follow him. He watches them running toward his car for about a good 500 feet. Thankfully, Dale was only about a minute from home when he spun out, so he is at his house in no time, where he gets out of the car and runs into the house. And he tells himself, everything is fine. He's sick, right? Obviously, he's hallucinating, right? I might tend to agree with Dale's self-assessment if it weren't for the fact that he's not the only one to have seen this deer-wolf transformation. In 2020, a Redditor named Lobotomy Pop, let's just call him Pete, is out driving in his truck with a friend in a suburb of southern Maine, which is their home turf. It's about 2 a.m., and they're rolling down an empty residential street that, during the day, is usually full of people. At the very edge of the car's headlights, Pete starts to see these feet and legs walking along. Lots of them. As the animals come more into the pool of light, Pete sees that it's a pack of wolves. At least 10 of them. Really? As if a pack of wolves strolling down a residential suburban street isn't weird enough, Pete watches as they all start to change shape, growing taller and thinner, until he is now staring at a herd of deer standing right in the middle of the road, staring at Pete like he's the one out of place. Eventually, I guess they decide they've made their point, and they all move off. Pete decides he couldn't have seen what he thought he just saw. Had to have been a trick of the light or something, and he just starts driving again. And that's that, until his friend, the one who's been silent the whole time, pipes up and says, "That's so strange. I could have sworn that was a pack of wolves, but I watched them transform into deer." They compare notes and come to two conclusions. First, there are no wolves in Maine. And second, if there were, they wouldn't be hanging out in the burbs. So what do you guys think? Is the not deer a single lane of cryptid road? Or is it a Reddit epidemic fueled by internet addicts with too much time on their hands? In this case, I think we need to consider that is a distinct possibility. Certainly, chronic wasting disease plays a part in some of these weird sightings. But, like I've said before, I don't think it can account for all of them. That being said, even though the not deer is a primarily Appalachian area phenomena, there's a guy in Alberta, Canada, with a website going where he collects stories of what he calls the deer man. I'll put a link to his website in the description. Maybe this is just a creature that has stayed under the radar because no one wanted to admit they saw deer running on two legs. And is it a solitary phenomena, or is it interwoven into this evolving patchwork quilt of interrelated encounters, histories, myths, and legends? I considered for about a hot second making a kind of connection chart on the wall, with the kind that connects everything with yarn. But I decided against it because I don't think I have a timer fast enough to clock which I run out of first, wall space or yarn. I have no idea if any of these things are related, but some things sure do seem a little too coincidental not to be. I'm relatively new to many of the rabbit holes that exist in this strange world. I am by no means an expert. But remember, some rabbit holes are just tunnels to the next connected rabbit hole. So stick around. Let's see how much yarn it takes. So what do you think? Are not deer real? I gotta tell ya, I was really leaning to the internet hoax side of the fence until I read about that weird deer sighting from 1951 that was published in the early 70s. It's kind of hard to fit that into an internet meme. If you want to check out some of the other rabbit holes we've been down already, click right here. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.